You're writing something that is based on or based in real life history. So how true to the facts do you have to be? We're going to pull back the curtain on that one today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking if you find value. Subscribe if you haven't done that. I really do appreciate it. Be sure to check out links below. Thank you again for watching. We're not going to waste any more time. Let's jump in. If you set any story in the past, unless it's a sci-fi or fantasy type story, and even then those might be a little border, how true to history do you need to stay in the story that you are writing? Like, how accurate do you have to be? I mean, if you're incorporating some element of history, or just some kind of vibe like Stranger Things or Bridgerton, okay, well, those are a different kind of animal to deal with than if you're incorporating actual people, like you're doing a story on Abraham Lincoln or Winston Churchill. Okay, that's different. So how do you navigate all this? I mean, how true to history do you have to really be? Let me say right off the bat here that you might be treading on some dangerous waters, because if you are talking about real life people who have been alive within the last 70-ish years or so, give or take, somewhere in there, you might need the rights. You might need their life rights. You might need the rights to a book. You might need something. So if it's something relatively new or recent, then you might need to consult a lawyer about that. I'm not a lawyer, so be sure to do that. I do have a video on copyright though, which might be helpful to you. I'll link that up here so you can check that out if that might pertain to you. So if you have something within the last 70 years or so, just be aware you might be treading on rights, and you might have to start getting permissions before you can actually, you could write the story, but you're not going to be able to do anything with it. So I would recommend not writing it. Like, why would you spend time writing something you can't do anything with? Like, I don't get that one. When you talk about a movie set in history, first question you should probably ask is, what is your goal? Are you wanting to be faithful to the original events? I mean, you're wanting to create a story that accurately portrays? Well, then, yeah, of course you're going to want to do as much historical accuracy elements as you can. Of course you will. But maybe that's not your goal. Maybe your goal is to fictionalize it. Maybe it's to make it a little more fun. Maybe it's to put a different spin on it. Maybe it's just to make light of something. Okay, well, that's a different thing. Then you kind of only sort of need to pay attention to historical accuracy, right? I mean, I don't have to totally pay attention to it if I'm doing something like Stranger Things or Bridgerton, because I don't really have to pay attention to the actual history, but I want it to feel like that world, so I want it to be kind of accurate. So what are you going for? I mean, what is your goal in telling the story? I would say though, if you're writing a story where the events in history are traumatic or culturally relevant, like it was a big cultural issue or something that was pivotal, especially something that people who are still alive will remember, you probably need to lean in more to the accurate side than the inaccurate side, if that makes sense. So on this front, maybe think of movies that might be like Schindler's List or Selma or Hidden Figures. I mean, we want to get some things really right when we tell those stories, so we want some historical accuracy there. And then there's other things that we have a little more leeway here. We can do a few more things. So if it's traumatic or if it's a culturally relevant story, then yeah, you probably need to lean in more to the historical accuracy element of it. The other thing to think about is, what tone are you going for? And by tone, what I mean here, as I'm saying this, is how do you want the audience to feel at the end of the story? Ultimately, you are telling a story because you want an audience to experience it. So how are you wanting them to feel at the end? And what you need to do then is, yes, you can ground it in historical elements, okay? For sure, ground it. So there's some definite historical accuracy there, but you can have some leniency with it because you're wanting the audience to feel a certain way, feel a certain thing, feel something about a particular character or a particular moment in time. So then you have a little more leniency. And in that case, you start leaning more into the story elements and the character elements and a little less away from history. And you might think of movies that might be something like Braveheart or Kingdom of Heaven or 1917. I mean, those are still kind of grounded and rooted in historical moments, but they're not trying to be historically accurate. They're just trying to portray a piece or a world that is relevant that we might get. Now, these movies, they're not setting out to be historically accurate. That's not their goal. Their goal is to make us feel something about a certain moment in time or about a certain event in history. So they're going to, yes, adopt as much of the historical accuracy as they can, but when it starts to get a little iffy, they're going to lean more into how we want the audience to feel. And we're going to lean more into story and a little more into character and deviate from some of the historical accuracies. As a screenwriter, story and characters should always come first because you are trying to craft a story and then you're trying to tell it well. So you have to take in both of these facets. So crafting the story, yes, I can look at the historical accuracy of things and I can try to incorporate those. But when I go to tell it, I might have to abandon some of this historical accuracy just because of the nature of the medium or because of the storytelling tool I'm wanting to use, or I need to shortcut this so I can't get into this little history stuff, so I just need to do it, and that because there's lots of nuances. I can't really explain all that. I can't be accurate there. I've got to kind of shortcut it, and people are going to be like, well, that's not entirely accurate. Yeah, I know it's not entirely accurate. It's fiction, right? It's a fictionalized story. I'm making a movie, so I'm going to lean more into character and story moments than historical accuracy. But again, you got to balance. Is it a true life story or is it just a story? So if it's true life and you're trying to be true to the true life, to the actual events, you got to lean more into the history. But if you're not trying to do that, you always default to story and character. Those always win out. So if it's a conflict between, well, this is historically accurate, but this makes better sense for my story, the historically accurate goes away. You do what makes sense for the story. That has to win out 9 times out of 10. The only time it really doesn't is when you're trying to write a accurate, true-to-life story. Here we go. For the most part, you don't need to be historically accurate. You don't. Do it when you can. Incorporate elements of it. Yes, it makes your story richer. Yes, it helps. But if you're spending all your time trying to explain the relevance of this historically accurate thing, you're not telling your story. And you need to be focused on telling the story. So most of the time, yes, let the research inform what you're doing, but you want to tell a good story. So it's okay, I'm giving you permission, it's okay to deviate from history to tell a good story. Again, how do you want the audience to feel at the end? And what is your goal? So if your goal is historically accurate, okay, you got to lean more into history. If it's not that, then you want to lean into story and character. Tell a good story, tell what works for your story. It's okay to not be historically accurate. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If it has, please be sure to like, subscribe, bell. I appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. When you go to tell a story, if you need to be historically accurate, do so, but otherwise always default to story. And when you do tell that story, tell a story that matters. See you later.